Well, welcome to the AI in Action podcast series, Lee.
Thanks so much, Hannah. I'm looking forward to it.
So, what scares you the most about AI?
I have been thinking a lot about the human condition and the degree to which AI is raising sort of the biggest, most hairy questions about the fate of humanity. It's the first time that other intelligences in the universe have challenged us. If you think about tools in the past, the ones that we've invented have always helped us in physical ways. They've made us faster and stronger and pulled together some ways to assemble information, but they've never had knowledge and intelligence baked into them. So this is the first time we've encountered any kind of intelligence along those lines, but it's certainly obvious that these intelligences are surpassing human intelligence, at least in some domains. So it's a brand new moment in the history of our species. And I think what worries me and scares me the most about AI is the knock-on effects, the after effects of the disruptions to employment that are going to occur. There's a big debate about whether it is going to be a just as essential kind of challenge to human work and getting paid for work and all the things that come from that. But I don't think it's disputable that whatever disruptions come ahead are going to challenge some of the basic elements of what it is to be human and how humans understand their place in the universe. So we've seen that in disruptive circumstances, people become demoralized. They lose a sense of purpose. There was this moment after the 2008, 2010 Great Recession, when the world financial economy went to shreds, where we began to see people, particularly in the American Midwest, men in the American Midwest, who lost their manufacturing jobs, both to China and to the recession, and really suffered for it. There was a phenomenon called deaths of despair, where particularly men in the Middle West who lost their jobs lost their sense of purpose and meaning and lost their reason for getting out of bed in some sense in the morning. And so the rise of suicides was very noticeable there. The rise of a sense of ennui, this no purpose to life, the sense that there was no purpose that these people could be serving in their families, in their communities, and things like that. And so it was basically an early warning for, I think, the period that comes ahead where many more jobs are going to be disrupted. Whether they're entirely lost or not, I think is debatable, but it's certainly the case that people are going to have to reteach themselves or learn new skills to be relevant in job markets. And particularly in America, that's so challenging because if you ask American, who are you? How do you understand yourself? A common answer is what they do for work and for living and for pay. And so if any kind of disruption to that occurs, and it's going to be consequential, whether it's overwhelming or not is, again, up for grabs, but the sense that we're going to have to establish in new terms what the purpose of life is, how you make meaning out of your life, what your identity is, that's all going to come to the fore. So, and it's occurring already in a society that is atomized and fragmented and disconnected. One of the big stories of the past couple of generations is how individualistic American society has become and how disconnected people feel from their neighbors, from the people around them, from the institutions that are meant to serve them. And so there's a sense that this disruption is going to occur in an already challenging environment. And of course, you add to that political polarization and people just not being happy with each other, distrusting each other, distrusting institutions around them. So I think AI is what scares me is what AI is going to do to the basic sense that people have that life is worth living, life can be joyful, life has purpose, there's a reason to hope for the future, and things like that. The other thing to remember about AI is it comes on the heels of the big disruption caused by social media. Basically, the same companies who gave us social media that are now giving us the big AI language model systems. And the new thing that AI is introducing to the social media environment was that social media was optimized for engagement and attention. And we see that when commercial enterprises are built around that kind of optimization, you eventually quickly get to a situation where people attack each other, where they are trying very much to annoy each other or to go after each other's well-being or purpose in life. It's not just a simple sharing of information, it's really disruptive and destructive to lots of relationships. What AI is adding to the mix is not only is it optimized for attention and engagement, it's optimized by these commercial companies for intimacy. We're just about to enter the era of AI agents. And the whole purpose of these companies creating these agents is to serve us, to act on our behalf in some circumstances. And in order to do that, we have to trust these agents. And so all of the sycophancy that we see in these AI models like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and things is built around people becoming more attached to AI. So I think this is all part of a piece of human identity being sort of on the table in the next era.
Yeah, that's such a great overview. I think, a lot of folks haven't connected the dots in terms of the disconnection, the lack of trust, and then this level of technological disruption hitting an environment that's already kind of fractured like that.
Yeah, the thing that's memorable, at least to me, in this is that the former Surgeon General of the United States basically said we were in an epidemic of loneliness.
Mhm.
And this is before some of the biggest advances in AI, these language models, came into being. And so you're throwing all of this new challenge into human experience in an environment where people already are feeling detached, feeling lonely, feeling disconnected from those around them. And so it's just not a very happy formula for joy.
That is true. So what are you hopeful about with AI?
Well, just to follow up on that answer, I know it sounds despairing and you asked what scared me. So I'm glad that you asked the other side of the question because I think there are ways in which there has been a vision articulated for humanity that's a grand one as it interacts with AI. It starts with this sort of beautiful poem that was written at the end of the 1960s by a poet, Richard Rodigan. It was called Machines of Loving Grace. And it was anticipating a world in which more and more machines would become more and more engaged with human activity and partners with humans and acting on behalf of humans. And the machines of love and grace were the machines that served us well. We found a really hospitable way to
Mhm.
exploit them and use them and get along with them. Found wonderful ways to have them enhance what we do and become partners in all kinds of ways, but especially sort of research partners and agents that would serve our purposes for learning and for getting better health care and for getting higher levels of education and knowing about the world around us. It was one of the expert contributors to the surveys that we do at Elon University is this fabulous technology journalist for the New York Times, John Markoff, and he wrote a book off this poem that was called Machines of Loving Grace, and it articulated a vision of cooperation and enhancement and augmentation by the machines towards human beings that was pretty beautiful, although it could go wrong, as John was smart to acknowledge. But it was also a theme that Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic and the Claude language model and knock on Claude Code and Claude Work and things like that. He wrote a pretty elaborate blog post 2 years ago about machines of loving grace and his sense that, done the right way, in the right relationship with human beings, that these machines could serve us very well, could enhance the things that are beautiful about the human species, and could be reined in or harnessed to make sure that some of the darkest prophecies didn't come true.
Mhm. Yeah, that's such a great description. How do you think AI is changing, our society, kind of the people behind all of this?
One of the ways that I speak hopefully about this is wearing my hat as a social science researcher.
Mhm.
It's a golden age of social science research, particularly on these questions about who we are, how we think about the world, how we make meaning and make purpose and make money in
Mhm.
worlds like this. So this is like a golden age of social science research, and I have spent a lot of time thinking about the big questions that these large language models invite us to
Mhm.
consider. The big bang moment for these large language models was when ChatGPT was released to the world on November 30th, 2022. So we've had not even 4 years of experience with direct contact with the intelligences that these language models represent. And so we're just in the earliest possible stages of figuring out what that means for us. But almost immediately, as those things became basically the fastest consumed and adopted
Mhm.
consumer technology in the history of when I've been studying it since
Mhm.
the turn of the millennium and long since. I mean, much more quickly adopted than television and radio
Mhm.
and personal computers and even the internet and social media. We've never seen levels of growth and adoption quite like we've seen with the arrival of language models. So it puts the biggest questions about humanity for researchers to explore is basically the way I've framed it is what are humans good for? Now
Mhm.
that we have these companionable intelligences next to us, what is going to give our life purpose and meaning and things like that. And when in about 2014, we did one of these future surveys of the expert database that we've developed at Elon University and when I was working at the Pew Research Center. And we asked these experts right at the time when there were the first studies about AI potentially replacing lots and lots of jobs.
Mhm.
We asked these experts, what do you think is going to happen? More jobs created than destroyed, or more jobs destroyed than created? We got an absolutely split verdict. Half the
Mhm.
sample said, yep, more jobs will be destroyed than created. It's going to be a disaster for the people who build their lives around their employment. Half the experts said, no, history is not necessarily a good teacher on this. The
Yeah.
past history has been that when big disruptions occur, of course, they hurt the people who are in at the dawn and in the middle of the disruption. But once it's occurred and embraced by generations of actors, you get more jobs, you get more wealth, you get longer life expectancy, you get richer societies that live longer. So that's pretty good in the Industrial Revolution. The naysayers, the people who are worried about this, basically say this is a new kind of disruption that doesn't parallel the things of the past. So we have that 50-50 verdict. Nevertheless, the people who on both sides of the equation, the people who are not thinking happily about the future and those who were thinking quite happily about the future, they agreed that the saving grace of for human beings would be what were called soft skills, things like
Mhm.
emotional intelligence, thinking like critical thinking, things like creativity, high level decision making, high level complex communication things. Those would be the things that jobs would be built around and that humans would still be the masters of their fate and actually the best performers in the universe. But since then, these AI tools have come to look a lot like some of those soft skills. So when as a researcher, I began to look at this. We began to think, well, what should we do to break down what those skills are and
Mhm.
see whether some of them might be overtaken by AI and some of them might survive whatever AI does to the rest of us. And so last year we did a survey of these experts and the general public after that about 12 different traits of human specialty or 12 things that really identify what human beings are characterized by. They're all those soft skills. They're social emotional intelligence, critical thinking, sense of agency, sense of identity and purpose, metacognition, literally that we have the capacity to think about our thinking, which is, we're just unique to us in the universe. What was so striking about this is that nine of the 12 things that we asked about, the experts said AI is going to be a negative force for things like social and emotional intelligence, the ability to create values, the confidence that we have in each other and institutions and things like that. But the expert said that three things about human beings would be well served by AI. The first was creativity and the capacity to learn. Innovative thinking was also one that would survive, and decision making. So if you look at those three, creativity, curiosity, and decision making, those are the formulas basically of great leaders. So the
Mm,
experts were basically saying great leadership would make sure that humans still have a place in the universe and still have control over their destiny and their agency. The public wasn't quite so convinced of that, but in a way, those things are now on the table for society to be thinking about, and it's a delight really to be exploring this as a researcher, just because there are so many grand, fresh questions that AI is raising, and I think that we're at a big moment in history when those things are on the table, and how we act now is going to influence what happens in future generations.
mm. Well, Lee, you really hit the nail on the head, I think, talking about how the rate of adoption with this technology is so much faster than what we've seen before. I have been working in technology over a decade, and I have never had to think so much about what it means to be human as with AI in the picture. And it's very different than like you said, the emergence of the internet or personal computers or smartphones or social media. It's it was in those things were impacting humans, but the rate was slower. And in my involvement in that, just kind of firsthand experience, I wasn't waking up every day thinking, hmm, what does it mean to be Hannah today when AI can do so much more than, my not always accurate or best self?
Yeah, I love that. And if, as people were using, let's pick any technology innovation, spreadsheets, as they were
Yeah.
entering data into spreadsheets and manipulating it in new kinds of ways more efficiently, they weren't thinking, well, what does this do to challenge the basic essence of who I am? They were saying,
Yeah.
hey, I have a quicker, faster, more efficient
Mhm.
tool to do the stuff that I really want. Social media might have been one of the moments when humans are thinking, well, I've got to think about how I present myself to the world and what I say and how I organize the filters from what other people are saying and things like
Mhm.
that. But again, I so agree with you that the sort of basic questions, existential questions about who I am and what am I good for in life have not been on the table until this moment.
Mhm. Yeah, it's quite revolutionary in ways that I think brings us to face with, kind of what it means to be human, our own humanity, which is stuff we have not put a lot of high priority on in our society for a long time.
Well, it's interesting that I've identified or I've thought about the two populations that have actually had this on the table since the dawn of recorded history. The first group is philosophers themselves. If you go back to the ancient Greeks and Romans,
Mhm.
they had a lot to say and think about what it means to live a good life, what it means
Mhm.
to be human, how to live in a society, and things like that. The other group that's been at it for a long time, of course, is spiritual communities.
Mhm.
But those are ancient things, and they have, in some respects, lost some ground in
Mhm.
modernity and the modern moment. And those they have been brought back with a fury into the current environment. There has been more reference to philosophers, ancient philosophers, in recent years than there probably has been over the millennia since the Greeks faded from history and the Roman Empire
Mhm.
collapsed and things. Same thing with spiritual communities. They've had some struggles in the era of modernity and secularism and things, but they're the kinds of ways that they think about the meaning of human life is just now back on the table. I mean, look
Mhm.
at the encyclical that Pope Leo just
Mhm.
issued about
Yeah.
humanity and AI. And it's been almost 100 years since the Catholic Church was thinking, well, we have to really address technology and its meaning for the faith, as well as sort of the modern moment and things. So it's that's one of the reasons this is an exciting moment to be studying all this.
So what do you think people misunderstand about AI?
I love this question, and I spent more time probably pondering it than the others on your list. I think one big misunderstanding is that people don't know how much AI is already humming away in the
Mhm.
background of their lives. It's not just, AI isn't just language models like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and things like that. It is stuff that powers the basic things that people in their digital lives have become reliant on. Things like, well, here, the Gallup survey organization did this marvelous poll like 2 years ago and asked people, do you use six of the major digital technologies in their lives? Weather forecasting, streaming services like Netflix, shopping sites and apps,
Mhm.
social media, navigation apps, turn-by-turn
Mhm.
apps in your car or just getting around town and things, and voice assistants. Do you use a voice assistant? Do you talk to Siri? Kind of
Yeah.
thing. 100% of Americans. You never, as a pollster, see 100% of Americans doing anything the
Yeah.
same, but 100% of Americans in the survey that they did said, yes, I use at least one of those services, and more than half used at least five of those services. And the same thing they asked is, do you think of this as AI? 64% of the respondents who use AI
Mhm.
systems like those six said, that's not AI to me. That's just stuff I use in life. And so there's a sense that our lives are being, moderated by, mediated by, controlled in some respects by, enabled by, steered by AI systems without necessarily us knowing it. Of course, the language models, which are very direct kind of thing that you can, you're signing up for some of them, and
Mhm.
you're using them because you're using the interface of them. But the other big difference about AI, distinct, for instance, from social media and mobile connectivity and even the internet itself, is the AI systems are often being built into the digital tools that people already use. It's in their email. It's offered to them as they do social media posts. It's offered to them as they are writing and consuming documents. It's offered to them as they are reading documents and want summaries of documents. And so that's one of the big reasons these tools have expanded as rapidly as they have, even as people are not necessarily thinking, oh, I'm an AI user at this moment. As a matter of fact, that probably isn't even a good question to ask anymore because people are so ignorant of the fact that it's in the background systems of their lives. And of course, that's one of the big challenges of this. If you think about regulating AI, which we'll talk about in a minute, the fact that it's humming away in the background is one of the mysteries of it and one of the things that's hard to get a grip on.
So, how do you think AI has the potential to impact democracy?
Well, there's a good and a bad story to this. The bad story is the one people focus on. So we
Mhm.
did a survey at Elon University in 2024, just heading into the election of that year. And the overwhelming response of Americans was that they are worried about the impact of AI on democracy. They thought about deep fakes, and they thought about
Mhm.
information wars, and they thought about the ease with which AI systems allow people to become information warriors
Mhm.
and slop creators, people who just
Mhm.
create just faked up stuff that
Mhm.
sometimes looks quite real and things. And so the overwhelming majority of Americans were thinking this can end well for us. And the political environment itself being so highly toxic and polarized, there was a deep concern that just it would, by orders of magnitude, get worse because AI systems enabled people to create convincing, quick, ubiquitously available misinformation and disinformation and just trick everybody out of it. The other thing that we picked up in that survey is a classic poll finding, which is people themselves thought that they were okay, but they thought their fellow citizens were a mess.
Mhm.
So what we asked was, do you think you're pretty good at discerning misinformation and disinformation? You could tell what's being generated by AI. A majority of Americans said, yes, I myself can do that. Then we asked, how good do you think your neighbors and your fellow citizens are? And most Americans said they're not good at it at all. And so there's this sense that people are maybe masters of their own capacity, but they really think their neighbors are idiots and are going to get fooled by this stuff and maybe driven to more extreme views by this stuff. So there's that's one part of the democracy story here. And yet there are ways in which government agencies, public institutions, the civil society organizations, nonprofits that operate in a political environment, they are using AI to gather more information about what the public thinks. They
Mhm.
are able to aggregate participation in a much more smart way. If you ask on your website, you're mounting an
Mhm.
initiative to improve the schools in your community.
Mhm.
If you're lucky, you might get 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 responses to that and a whole lot of suggestions out of those responses. Well, before these AI systems could work their way through these things, somebody had to, read them individually and try to make sense of them just by eyeballing the responses.
Mhm.
Now AI systems can aggregate that and point out the key themes that are emerging and point out some of the innovative ideas that have been surfaced in things. So there are ways in which these systems can well serve democratic purposes if they're done in the right way.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your kind of two sides to the coin there. I've been hearing all the gloom and doom and not the other side, so thank you.
I'm working with a group at GovLab, which
Okay.
is a wonderful initiative at Northeastern University run by a dear friend of mine, Beth Novak. And one of their big missions is to begin to teach government workers about AI systems. And a lot of the workers that sign up to take their courses, they're wonderful courses, the people who sign up often don't have any sense how AI might be useful in the way that they are doing their job. Most enter the process of taking these courses saying, I don't know anything. And in many cases, what that means is I don't want to do anything about it because all I've heard is all the problems that you can raise about this,
Mhm.
and I don't know if my boss is going to like me for doing
Mhm.
this. And so, one of the wonderful benefits that these courses bring to government workers is a sense of confidence that they know what these systems are about, a sense of reality and wariness and skepticism that they can apply to using these things, but also a sense that they can do their jobs better and maybe even add some wrinkles to their jobs that weren't possible because these AI systems weren't available to them before they took the course. And so, there are ways in which the dark side and the light side, sit very close to each other in
Yeah.
almost all technologies, and especially in these.
So, what safeguards do you think should be in place regarding AI?
In part because we're studying the human reaction to and human place in a
Mhm.
world full of AI systems. The most recent research we did was trying to answer this very question, and we
Mhm.
framed it as research around resilience, human resilience.
Mhm.
And there were a couple of striking things that we got from our canvassing of experts on this. Almost 400 experts responded, and some wrote elaborate essays about the idea of resilience. And there were a couple of big takeaways from that research. The first was that the standard things about human resilience that have served us so well as a species, basically human grit, human
Mhm.
adaptability, the human capacity to rebound, the human capacity to learn and move on and basically embrace the lessons of disruption and challenge and change. Those are still going to be very necessary in the world to come, but they're not going to be sufficient. These experts
Mhm.
argued that in part because AI is humming away in the background of so much of our lives, that it will take also an institutional response for humans to feel like they are supported and affirmed and have the capacity to challenge AI systems when AI systems aren't working well. So they said institutions are almost the first layer of defense that we need to make sure that the future turns out well for us.
Mhm.
The second thing is they sort of elevated the idea of AI literacy, which is a standard
Mhm.
thing that lots of people talk about when they think about human adaptation to AI. You've got to learn what it does and got to learn how it can serve you and what some of the problems are related to it. Their argument was, yes, you need that kind of AI literacy, but they argued for a grander concept that they called existential literacy because all of this human stuff is on the table, because the essence of humanity or essence of human beings is now being debated and being challenged, we're going to need to learn how to be better human beings and to have the sort of core qualities of human capacity nurtured and taught. And so it's not just mastering a technical system like the alphabet
Mhm.
in AI. It's going to be much more having a sense of how to retain agency, how to form identity, how to rebound when you've been disrupted by these technologies, and a mindset that's going to take to that. Another point that they made is that friction and slowness and a Greek idea called phronesis, which is practical knowledge, practical applied wisdom. That's going to serve us well in the future too. AI is great at giving efficient answers to things, whether they're right or wrong. AI is great at giving answers that sound very definitive and very conclusive, and sound like the wisdom of the age. So slowing down and saying, what's really going on here? What do I really think about this? What are ways in which I'm bringing my biases to my understanding of this? How do I sort of make sure that I'm not falling victim to confirmation bias and things like this? So friction, phronesis, this idea that slowing down and taking stock is a good thing to embrace as you're using these systems. That was a great idea. And the final answer that they gave us was about the emerging challenges of social complexity. We're going to be managing these bots now that are going to act on our behalf. We're going to be encountering bots from other people that are going to be asking things of us. So humans haven't been designed to be thinking like that. So a sense of safeguards around just making sure that we are masters of the complexity of this new social environment, particularly through like education systems and things like that. That's going to be important. And of course, they also call just for sort of standard levels of transparency and accountability and contestability in the AI systems themselves. If you or a loved one or a business you're in has been harmed by this stuff, you ought to be able to sue somebody. And you ought to be able to call them to account for the ways that they did it. Right now, the systems are opaque. They're black boxes. It isn't quite clear where decisions in many cases came from or where steering was occurring. And so there are lots of ways that the law and government itself need to be part of the story here.
So what do you think an AI empowered future is going to look like for Americans?
Well, one of the great quotes that we got in this study of resilience from the experts that we got, it came from a Arizona State University researcher named Mel Selleck. She told us, we are the last generation that knows what human capacity felt like before it became inseparable from AI. In other words,
Mm.
our children and grandchildren are going to be in a world where virtually every touch point of connection they have with information, with each other, with the AI systems themselves is going to be mediated by AI, whether they like it or not, whether they try to organize themselves or not. Unless you go completely off the grid and completely back to the wilderness, this is a world in which AI is the mediating force and the risk assessment force and the rights enforce, and all things like that. So I think we're at a hinge moment there that an AI future will be well informed if we get more insight into who we are by the kind of research that lots of people are doing now. If we be clear about the ethical standards and sensibilities that we want to apply to these systems and how we embrace them in our lives. Um, there are going to be ways in which the future might look great if we can figure out how to use these tools to advance our knowledge and education and exploration of morality and ethics and things. But it also, each one of these positive things has a darker side if things don't break well. And I guess the final thing that I would suggest here in a hopeful future for Americans would be a mindset of flexibility and fluidity. We're going to have to anticipate problems before they arise. We can't wait for the disaster to befall us to begin to plan for how to get our way out of it. And so there's a lot greater call on us and our educational institutions to teach us how to just be prepared for the kinds of disruptions that are inevitable in the world to come. And I think the grand argument is that if we master that, if we develop the mindset for that, if we anticipate the ways in which our institutions can well serve us in an environment like that, the future for Americans looks pretty good. If we fail at any of those things, of course, the future could be much darker.
What an exciting time to be alive.
It is.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights, Lee, on the AI in Action series. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Hannah. It's been great to be with you.